So when they first asked me to come speak at the Next Web, I was sitting at my desk, and I received this email, and it was from Julie, and I opened the email, and upon reading it, I slowly slipped from my chair, under my desk, cradled my knees, and looked at my coworker, Matt, and I said, Matt, I just got asked to speak at a conference, and I think they have the wrong person. And for the next couple of days, I went back and forth from like, fuck yeah, this is gonna be awesome, to, oh shit, they definitely picked the wrong person. And eventually I said, yes. And I still went back and forth between these emotions. Especially when they announced the list of speakers. So I looked at the list of speakers, and a lot of them were like VP, CEO, CEO, founder of something, Kanye West, the Dalai Lama. And then there was me, Jeany Ngo, designer. And I knew then what I wanted to talk about. So I'm Jeany Ngo, and I'm an imposter. I constantly feel like, despite my achievements and my successes, I'm always looking over my shoulder waiting to be found out as a fraud. Neil Gaiman, one of my favorite authors, says that the first problem of any kind of success is this unshakable conviction that you're going to be found out, that you're getting away with something, and that you're going to be found out. In fact, imposter syndrome is common among anyone who's achieved any kind of success. Whether it be starting in a new industry, starting a new job, or starting in a new position, like designer, or a manager position, or you're a lead in a project, or even an executive position. Sheryl Sandberg writes in Lean In that there are days when she wakes up feeling like a fraud. Imposter syndrome is common among so many people. Sorry, one thing, I don't have my notes on here. Is there any way that we can put them on here? Because I'm like figuring it out. But there we go, yay! All right, Sheryl Sandberg wrote in Lean In about feeling like an imposter. In fact, as you advance in your career, there's less precedent set for what you're doing, and the risk becomes greater and greater. It's important to acknowledge when you're an imposter, and to help those that you lead face their imposters and embrace it. So where does the imposter come from? It starts with an idea of what success looks like. Maybe what success looks like for a job title, or for a position like designer or lead, or manager, or even that executive position. Maybe it's that idea of what success looks like for something you're working on. And over time, that idea of success grows and changes. As you find people who you admire, who have that job title, who are experts in the field, or who are the shining examples of the profession, authority figures in the industry, you add traits to this idea of success, and eventually that idea becomes a standard, an expectation that defines what is that shining example, that authority figure, or even being perfect at that job title or career. And after a lot of hard work, you get this job title. You get hired as that designer, you're promoted to lead or manager, or you're brought on as that executive. But you don't completely meet the standards, or you don't feel like you completely meet the standards. You don't feel like an authority figure, you don't feel like that shining example, you don't feel like you're the perfect version of what you should be. You feel like an imposter, a fraud. So how does the imposter affect us? Where you don't completely meet your standards and expectations, you feel insecure. Because these imperfections, if anyone sees these imperfections, you'll be found out as a fraud, an imposter. So for me, my idea of a perfect designer is one that knows multiple design disciplines, not just product design, but they know things like typography or package design, and they learn this usually through design school or having extensive agency backgrounds. I don't have a proper design background. I taught myself code and design through YouTube and designing websites and freelancing here and there and on the job. I'm constantly feeling really insecure about this, and I always feel out of place. You're constantly comparing yourself, taking a look again at those people that you admire, right? Taking a look at those experts in the field, the shining examples in the profession and the authority figures of the industry. You're nowhere near that level of success and achievement. You're not as good. So what are you even doing here? Most of my coworkers have amazing design backgrounds. They've gone to design schools. A lot of them have extensive agency backgrounds. Even our founders and CEO went to RISD, which is a well-known design school in the States. I'm constantly comparing myself to my peers, and it adds to my insecurities, and I definitely feel out of place. There's so much at stake now. If you fail, people might lose faith in you. You'll lose their respect. You'll lose your reputation. And for leaders, you feel like you have to maintain this semblance of authority and respectability. So you're cautious about doing anything that might expose the imposter. So you keep from taking too big of risks. You keep from applying for that role, or you're worried about that promotion because there's a lot of more responsibilities. Or you keep from pitching too big of a product idea. So you keep your imposter to yourself. You keep your shortcomings and insecurities and imperfections to yourself and mitigate as much risk as possible, and you keep any failures to yourself. You keep your process precious because if anyone knows how you got here or what you're doing, you'll be figured out. And even worse, they'll take your process, learn from it, be better than you, and all your work will be for nothing. You'll be obsolete. Even when you do succeed, you don't give yourself enough credit. I constantly find myself saying, I fooled them. I just got lucky. I'm the diversity hire. Or it's because I'm a woman. And you attribute your successes to something else. And even when you do succeed, it won't last long anyway, because you'll be found out eventually. So now that you know about your imposter and where it comes from, and have acknowledged it, how do you embrace it for yourself, let alone for anyone else that you're leading? The first things first is to concede perfection. Concede that there's an idea of a perfect version of what you should be. Joseph Campbell, in his story, The Power of the Myth, talks about a tribe that tells their children and their youth about a masked god, an all-knowing masked god, and that they have a rite of passage to fight this god and defeat it. But upon defeating it, and when they unmask the god, they find out that this is just an ordinary person, and they realize that now they have to don that mask and carry forth this all-knowing God for the next generation. We need to concede the idea that there is a perfect version, and that meeting the standards and expectations means that we've become that perfect version. As you advance in your career, as you gain more and more experience, as you meet aspects of the expectations and standards, those standards and expectations will grow and change and evolve. There will always be something for you to learn. There's always going to be something for you to improve upon. For those you lead, you have to concede that perfection. It's okay to encourage them to strive to be better at what they do, but there's no such thing as perfect. Define what success means for you. Everyone has their individual strengths and weaknesses. Success and growth should be measured based on how you develop your own strengths and how you overcome your own individual weaknesses and challenges, not in comparison to anyone else's. Your success isn't relative to anyone else's. I often compare myself to other designers and tear myself down for when my work doesn't resemble theirs. But I have to acknowledge what success means for me and where I've been, what I've been doing, and my own experiences. The same goes for those you lead and manage. They should be measured based on their individual strengths and weaknesses. And there can be a baseline, there should be a baseline, but that should be adjusted accordingly to what may facilitate their growth. Failure is constantly stigmatized and reprimanded. It's thought that failure reveals our imperfections. But failure is just a label we put on something that didn't happen the way that we expected it to. As we learn from where it didn't go right, we learn and grow from it. As leaders and mentors, we should create safe spaces for those that we lead and remove that stigma. One of my mentors, Steve Johnson, has said to me, failure is always an option, and sometimes the best option, because the growth that you gain from failing and learning from it can be greater than succeeding in the first place. Be honest and open to yourself and your team. Admit your failures and be open to the feedback so you can grow. We think vulnerability means weakness, but vulnerability allows for empathy. It makes you more human, and it makes you more admirable. Earlier this year, we had an Airbnb employee conference, and we had executives come up on stage and talk about one thing that they failed in or that they wanted to improve or felt that they needed to improve on in the past year. And they talked about what they will do in the coming year and how they'll improve. And it was an incredibly vulnerable and honest thing for them to do. And it kind of broke this barrier between them as executive staffs and us, the employees. And it just made me respect them a lot more. Lastly, be an advocate for yourself and for those you lead. Celebrate your wins. You got the job. You're hired on a new project. You've been promoted. You're now part of the executive staff. You just gave a presentation in front of a ton of people on being an imposter. Help those you lead to feel their successes, because we're all frauds sometimes. And we can help each other embrace the imposter. Thank you.